The stars burned cold that night. Commander Ethan Cole stood in the command well of the USS Resolute, hands clasped tightly behind his back, staring through the panoramic viewport that dominated the bridge. Beyond the glass stretched the Orion Expanse, a place so far from the core worlds that light itself seemed reluctant to make the journey. The nebulae here glowed faintly, like dying embers in a hearth, casting the stars in cold blue light. It was quiet. Too quiet. Ethan liked the edge of known space. Out here, the galaxy felt ancient and honest, a place stripped of politics, a place where a man could breathe. But tonight, something gnawed at him. The uneasy stillness shattered when the console by the helm chimed. "Commander," said Lieutenant Sarah Kane, the ship's communications officer, her voice tight with urgency. "Priority 1 transmission from Earth Command. Encrypted, highest clearance." Ethan turned slowly, his stomach sinking. Priority 1 wasn't routine. It wasn't even serious. It was catastrophic. "Routed to my console," he said, striding across the bridge. The crew fell silent as the overhead lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the deck. The holo-emitter flared to life, projecting the face of Admiral Jonathan Reeves, Earth Command's senior fleet director. His expression was grim, jaw set, eyes bloodshot as if he hadn't slept. "Commander Cole," Reeves began, his voice carrying the weight of a man delivering a death sentence. "We have confirmed reports of an Accord breach. Location, Erebus 4 colony." The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Erebus 4 wasn't a fortress world. It wasn't a strategic hub. It was a quiet science colony on the frontier, a place where families lived, where children chased each other in artificial gravity under the pale light of a distant sun. "What kind of breach?" Ethan asked, though a sick part of him already knew. Reeves hesitated, just for a second, and then said the words that would ignite a war. "Colony destroyed. Total population loss. Surface glassed." The bridge fell into a suffocating silence. Blast. The word echoed in Ethan's mind like a scream. It meant orbital bombardment with high-energy plasma, turning cities into molten slag and soil into fused black glass. It was not just murder. It was erasure. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her knuckles white. At tactical, Lieutenant Mark Alvarez muttered a curse under his breath. "Who?" Ethan said at last, his voice low, dangerous. Reeves' image flickered. "Sensor telemetry identifies Valorian capital ships in orbit at the time of destruction. Their transponder signatures are confirmed. This was no pirate raid, Commander. This was a sanctioned military strike." The deck seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. The Valorians, one of the founding species of the Stellar Accord, the very pack that had kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart for 2 centuries. They were diplomats, scholars, engineers. Proud, yes, but rational. "Why?" Ethan demanded, but Reeves only shook his head. No demands, no broadcast, no declaration. Just annihilation. Something hot and sharp coiled in Ethan's chest, raged like molten metal. "You have your orders, Commander," Reeves said. "Proceed to Erebus 4. Confirm evidence, gather survivors if any remain. Command is convening an emergency council session with the Accord members. Expect further orders once you have confirmation." The transmission ended, and the bridge lights brightened again, but the air felt darker. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the low hum of the Resolute's engines. Finally Sarah spoke, her voice quiet. "Sir." Erebus 4 had over 20,000 civilians. Families. Kids. "I know," Ethan said. His mind raced. The Stellar Accord wasn't just a treaty. It was the only thing that made life in the galaxy bearable. One law, carved into history after centuries of brutal conflict: no attacks on civilian colonies. Ever. It was the line no one crossed, not pirates, not warlords, not even the most ruthless empires. And now the Valorians had crossed it. "Bring us to full battle readiness," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Sound general quarters. Set course for Erebus 4, maximum FTL. Alvarez straightened. Aye, sir. Spinning up jump drives. Ethan turned to Sarah. Send to Earth Command, Resolute acknowledges. Requesting immediate authorization to engage if hostile Valorian forces remain in system. Sarah hesitated. Sir, if we engage them, this could ignite war. Ethan's voice was calm, almost too calm. War started the moment they burned Erebus 4. The words seemed to hang in the air like the tolling of a bell. Sarah swallowed hard and nodded. Message sent. The bridge crew sprang into motion, their training kicking in, but the weight of what they were doing hung heavy on them. Humanity had never launched a war on this scale. Not in generations. When the jump drive reached readiness, Ethan gave the order. Execute FTL jump. The stars stretched into bright white lines as the Resolute hurled itself into the void, engines screaming as reality folded around them. In the command well, Ethan stood motionless, staring at the streaking light. His reflection stared back from the viewport, hard eyes, clenched jaw, the face of a man who had seen too much death to let this pass unanswered. Images flashed in his mind, the holofeeds of Erebus 4's lush valleys, the laughter of colonists in transmission logs, the bright-eyed children who had waved at the last Terran supply ship. All gone now, burned away as though they had never existed. His fists tightened. When they arrived, he promised himself, there would be answers. And if there were no answers, there would be fire. The USS Resolute tore out of FTL like a blade ripping through silk. The sudden return to real space made the stars snap back into place, the infinite black swallowing them whole. Exit complete, Helm reported. We're in the Erebus system. Ethan Cole stood with his hands gripping the railing of the command well, shoulders squared, jaw like iron. Bring up orbital view, he said quietly. The main holoprojector came alive. The crew fell into a hushed, horrified silence. Erebus 4 filled the viewport, but it was no longer green. No longer alive. The planet's surface was a patchwork of glowing scars, vast rivers of glass running like veins of fire across its continents. Plumes of dust and soot still rose into the thin atmosphere, casting a pale haze that dimmed the sun's light. Jesus, Alvarez whispered from tactical. Sarah Kane's hand covered her mouth, her knuckles white. I'm not detecting any life signs, Commander. Not one. Entire biosphere's been sterilized. Ethan said nothing. The scans continued, the silence of the bridge broken only by the hum of machinery. Debris field detected in high orbit, Alvarez reported, his voice grim. Civilian transports, colony freighters, defense platforms, all slagged. Picking up warp signatures. Recent? Ethan asked. Within the last 48 hours, Alvarez confirmed. They didn't even bother to mask their trail. Valorian capital ships, multiple classes. Sarah's voice was tight with anger. They wanted us to know it was them. Or they didn't think we'd do anything about it, Alvarez added. Ethan's hands tightened on the railing until his knuckles ached. He turned toward the crew. Download everything. Telemetry, gravimetric trails, weapon signatures. I want ironclad evidence before command and the tribunal. Aye, sir, Sarah said, fingers flying across her console. But even as he gave the order, Ethan knew what was coming next. The tribunal would meet, yes. The Valorians would give their carefully worded excuses, yes. The other Accord races would argue and debate for weeks, while the people of Erebus 4 lay in the cold dirt, nameless and forgotten. Not this time. When the data download was complete, Earth Command's reply came through. The entire bridge crew stopped to listen as Admiral Reeves' voice filled the air. Terran High Command authorizes retaliatory strike. Target, Valorian outpost, Velan sector. Objective, neutralize. Authorization level, Omega. Omega. The word carried weight. It was rarely spoken, a direct order authorizing full military reprisal. The bridge was silent for a moment, the meaning sinking in. This is it, Alvarez muttered. This isn't a policing action, Sarah said. This is war. Ethan nodded once, slowly. Set course for Velan. Maximum burn. Battle stations. The klaxons blared across the ship, bathing the corridors in red light. Crew scrambled to weapons stations, loaders locked in fresh antimatter cells, gunners checked firing solutions. The Resolute was no longer just a ship, it was an executioner sharpening its blade. Hours later, they reached Valorian space. Contact. Alvarez barked. 5 cruisers on intercept vector. They've already powered weapons. Raise shields, Ethan ordered. Battle Plan Gamma 3. The cruisers closed in fast, their sleek, triangular hulls cutting through the void. The Valorian hail came through moments later, a hologram of a tall, silver-skinned commander materializing in the command well. His narrow features twisted in contempt as his gaze swept over the bridge. Human vessel, the alien said in clipped, disdainful standard. You are trespassing in sovereign space. Turn back immediately, or we will engage. Ethan stepped forward, every inch the image of a Terran naval officer. This is Commander Ethan Cole of the USS Resolute. You broke the accord. You slaughtered 20,000 civilians on Erebus 4. There will be no turning back. The Valorian bared his sharp teeth, not quite a smile. The accord is weakness. Your kind hides behind it because you fear the true nature of the galaxy. We do not. Erebus was necessary. Sarah's eyes flashed. Necessary, she hissed under her breath. The alien continued. Leave this place, Terran. Or be destroyed. The transmission cut. For a long, taut moment, only the thrum of the ship's engines filled the silence. Target-led cruiser, Ethan said, his voice like the edge of a blade. Alvarez hesitated just long enough to meet Ethan's gaze, then his hands flew over the console. Target locked. Fire. The Resolute's main plasma batteries spoke with a thunderous roar, even through the vacuum of space. Coherent lances of white-hot energy streaked across the void and punched through the Valorian flagship's shields like they were paper. The ship blossomed into a silent inferno, breaking apart into molten shards. All ships returning fire. Alvarez shouted. The Resolute rolled hard, the inertial dampeners straining as bolts of Valorian plasma seared past the hull. The crew moved with precision-born discipline, rerouting power, adjusting shields, returning fire with merciless efficiency. The battle was brutal but short. Valorian ships were fast, but the Resolute was faster. It weaved through their formation, tearing them apart one by one with pinpoint strikes. Within minutes, the last cruiser exploded, leaving only debris and glowing wreckage in their wake. When it was over, the Valorian outpost loomed ahead of them, a sprawl of orbital stations, docks, and weapons platforms hanging silent against the starfield. Defenses are offline, Alvarez reported. They're hailing us asking for surrender terms. Ethan stared at the outpost for a long, cold moment. He thought of the families on Erebus 4. The children. The glassed cities still glowing in the dark. Helm, he said quietly, bring us within optimal range. Sarah's voice was tense. Sir, are we taking prisoners? No, Ethan said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, the kind of calm that comes after a storm. Fire. The Resolute unleashed its fury. Railguns spat hypersonic slugs that punched through station hulls like tissue paper. Plasma torpedoes erupted in waves, detonating fuel depots and weapons caches. The outpost became a burning pyre in the void, its destruction casting eerie light across the Resolute's hull. When the last explosion faded, silence reigned. Message to Valorian High Council, Ethan ordered. Tell them this was only the beginning. Sarah transmitted the message with shaking hands. Ethan turned back toward the viewport, watching as pieces of the outpost drifted apart, glowing embers in the black sea of stars. They wanted to see what humanity would do, he said softly, almost to himself. Now they know. And somewhere deep in Valorian space, alarms would already be screaming. Because humanity had answered, and their answer had been fire. What followed was not a war. It was a reckoning. Across Valorian space, the Terran Navy moved like a blade, cutting with surgical precision. Convoys were intercepted.
Military depots were wiped clean in coordinated strikes.
Shipyards that had stood for centuries were turned into molten ruins that lit entire sectors.
Every engagement began the same way. A single transmission went out, broadcast in every known frequency, translated into Valorian tongue. This is for Erebus 4.
And then the fire fell. The Resolute led the campaign. Wherever Ethan Cole's ship appeared, destruction followed. The crew had grown harder, quieter, the shock they had felt over Erebus 4 burned away and replaced with something colder.
Purpose.
Target lock on Valorian destroyer group complete, Alvarez reported 1 week into the campaign. His voice carried no excitement, no triumph.
Just focus. Fire, Ethan ordered. The main battery lit space in brilliant arcs, carving through the destroyer formation. Explosions blossomed silently, debris spinning into the void.
There were no cheers from the bridge crew.
Just the next set of coordinates, the next jump calculation, the next strike.
Message from Fleet Command, Sarah said 1 shift later.
Task Force Atlas reports successful strike on Valorian staging ground in Veltau. Casualties, 0. Enemy assets destroyed, 93%.
Good, Ethan said, his voice flat.
Plot our next course. Each victory only drove them harder. Each destroyed outpost, each shattered warship was a step closer to balance.
The Valorians fought back, but they were unprepared for this kind of war. They had believed humanity to be diplomats, mediators, explorers, soft. They had forgotten the centuries when Earth had nearly destroyed itself in conflict, when humanity had learned the hard way that survival sometimes meant burning everything down.
And now they were remembering.
The galaxy watched in silence. Other Accord members convened endless councils, issuing pleas for calm. Some warned Earth to halt before the conflict escalated beyond control.
But none of them moved to intervene. Not after the images of Erebus 4 were leaked to the public.
Those images, the glass cities, the ash-choked skies, the children's toys melted into black rock, spread like wildfire across Terran space. There were no protests. No cries for diplomacy. Only a single, unified demand.
Make them pay. Weeks passed.
The Resolute now moved deeper than any human warship had ever dared, striking military infrastructure near Valoria Prime itself. Ethan stood at the viewport as they dropped out of FTL over a massive orbital shipyard, a station so vast it cast a shadow across the planet below.
Commander, Alvarez said, enemy stations powering weapons. 30 seconds to full readiness.
Ethan stared at the colossal structure.
Tens of thousands of Valorian workers were down there. Engineers. Pilots.
Soldiers. The part of him that had once hesitated was gone now. Bring us to attack range, he said. Sir, Sarah said quietly from her console, if we destroy this yard, Valorian fleet production will be crippled for decades. That's the idea, Ethan replied. When the Resolute's batteries opened fire, the shipyard erupted in brilliant chains of detonations. Docked cruisers went up like kindling, their reactors breaching one after another until the entire structure was a cloud of incandescent debris.
The planet below lit up with atmospheric entry fires as wreckage rained down.
When it was done, the comm board lit up.
Incoming transmission, Sarah said, her voice almost disbelieving. Ethan nodded.
Put it through. The hologram that appeared was not a commander this time, but a Valorian counselor, old, his silver skin lined, his eyes grim. Terran vessel, he said, his voice low. We request parley. The High Council seeks cessation of hostilities.
We will stand before the Galactic Tribunal. Our fleets are recalled. Our war is over. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Transmit acceptance, Ethan said at last.
The transmission ended. Slowly, as if waking from a spell, the bridge crew began to exhale. Sarah sat back in her chair, rubbing her face with both hands.
Alvarez let out a low, shuddering breath. It's over, Sarah whispered.
Ethan's gaze lingered on the viewport, on the drifting wreckage still glowing faintly against the stars. No, he said quietly.
It's balanced. Balanced.
The word felt heavy, but right.
Nothing could bring back Erebus 4.
But the galaxy now understood that the accord was not a polite suggestion, it was a promise carved into the void, one humanity would enforce with fire if needed.
When the Resolute returned to Erebus 4, the crew assembled in the observation bay.
They carried canisters of crystallized memory ash, soil samples, melted glass, fragments of what had once been home. Ethan stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber.
"We cannot rebuild what was lost," he said. "But we can remember. And we can make sure no one ever dares do this again."
The canisters were released into the black, scattering into a glittering cloud that slowly drifted outward, a shining memorial orbiting the dead world. The bridge was silent on the return trip.
Ethan stood alone at the viewport, watching the stars slide by. In their cold light, he saw the faces of the fallen, not haunting him, but watching.
They had been avenged. And somewhere, in every council chamber across the galaxy, every leader was remembering what humanity truly was, a species that built, yes, but one that would burn when wronged and would never stop until the scales were even.
Ethan turned back toward the bridge crew, who were waiting for his next order.
"Plot a course for Sol," he said.
"Let's bring them home." The Resolute's engines flared, carrying them toward the distant light of Earth.
And in their wake, the stars were quieter.
Because now, the galaxy knew. If you broke the only law of the stars, humanity would answer with fire.